Welcome to the Roadmap to Secure Love. In today's episode, Kim and Kyle discuss how taking care of yourself as a parent is the key to raising emotionally secure kids. Let's dive in.
So today we're going to talk about how to raise secure kids. And this might seem like it sounds really nice, but it's actually really hard. I think it's really hard, right? Because, for example, picking up my daughter from daycare, we're coming home. I got my son in the car who's 9 months old, and my daughter starts crying about how she wants a cracker. And I reach back and hand her a cracker, and she's like, I don't want that cracker. And she starts to throw a big fit and starts to cry a little bit. And I'm trying to comfort her. And then she tells me she wants a hug. And I'm like, of course you want a hug. And on the inside, I'm like going, oh my gosh, can we just get home? I just am so ready to get home and I can give her the hug and that I don't have to hear this crying because I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. But I know that she's just wanting comfort. And so even though I can't pull over the car, or I mean, I could, but I chose not to pull over the car, but I could still try to connect with her emotionally. It's like, of course you want a hug. Daddy wants to give you a hug too. I'm like, so excited to give you a hug. I'm going to give you that in a few minutes. No, I want a hug now. Of course you want that. I know it's really hard when you can't get what you want. I love you. I'm going to give you that hug. Okay. Whew. And then I get to kind of go, okay, I can drive for a few more minutes till we get home. Right. But it's those moments, I think for parenting, it's really hard to try to show up and meet our kids where they're at, especially when they're dysregulated, especially when they don't fully understand. And we have to hold both the boundaries to kind of teach them that they don't get what they want, and at the same time try to connect with how it feels for them while also trying to regulate for me in that instance, driving my car, also dealing with my son who's starting to cry and get upset too, and to try to engage with them as we're trying to get home. It's overwhelming at times.
Oh my goodness, I could just feel the overwhelm too. Like when you're driving and you've got to be safe and
Hmm.
you've got two kids in the background crying and needing you and wanting you, and your priority is to make sure that you get home.
Yep. It's-
Whew.
Yeah.
But yet you still want to be there for them and you want to acknowledge that they have needs. And then
Hmm.
they don't stop after you tell them that, like in 5 minutes, you will get a hug. Let's just get home safely. And they keep, no, now, no,
Yep.
now, no,
Hmm.
now.
Hmm.
Um, and that happens all the time.
Yeah. Especially with a toddler and an infant. Yes.
Yes, it happens all the time. It's like right now, my needs are the only thing that matters.
Mhm.
That's what they say. And that's developmentally appropriate.
It is.
And to ignore them
Hmm.
is helpful.
No.
To punish them is not helpful.
Mm-mm.
But to acknowledge, to validate, and to set a boundary and to respond when you can is healthy, which is what you did.
Right. But I think this is what's so hard. There was that part of me that wanted to get louder to kind of shut her down, right? Wanted to
Sure.
dominate, try to stop it because I was feeling overwhelmed. There's also a part of me that didn't want to respond. I gotta get 3 more minutes till this car's in the driveway, then I can deal with it, right? That was all there for me, right? And I think for a lot of parents, depending on our capacity or overwhelm, sometimes we might make some of those choices, right? But that's where we can learn from ourselves what's going on with me. Why did I choose that path as a way to connect with my child? Because I don't want to have them shut down. I want them to have a voice. I want them to tell me what they need. I want to be able to help them learn how to navigate their emotions. And so that's also like even when I do it poorly, or I have gotten loud in the past, or I have tried to do some of these other moves of apologizing to my daughter or my son, even if they don't fully understand what that even means quite now, and then trying to do it again differently and trying to learn from myself. What was it about that I got to this point? And that's all really hard work.
It's so hard. What I love that you said it though is something that I think at least the previous, our parents and our grandparents didn't provide often because they grew up in a different time is that apology,
Yeah.
right? Because we're human
Hmm.
and we're gonna miss it
Hmm.
and we're gonna do things wrong.
Absolutely.
And to be able to acknowledge that to our children is extremely empowering for them.
Mhm.
Shows that you can make mistakes and still it's still okay.
Yeah, and that you're learning too. And I think this is what's important. The attachment research tells us, I think it's like our kids really need us to be attuned and like only 30% of the time, right? That's like an A plus in building a secure attachment. And then also, right, 80% of the time of that attunement, we have to have that good relationship. But 20% of that time, it's repairs. It's us making a mistake and being able to acknowledge it and talk to them. And even if they don't quite understand the words, to have a sense that we're trying to re-engage and make things better. And because secure attachment for ourselves as individuals, but also for our kids, is really a felt sense of emotional safety.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what we want our kids to grow up with so that they can then thrive in the world of connection and society.
Yeah, and I can totally hear all of the parents out there that are new parents, especially, and
Hmm.
thinking about, do I really create the connection enough for 80%? Because I am overwhelmed, I am stretched. I am this awful, 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 awful parent. I'm not doing it right. My kids are going to be totally messed up.
Hmm.
I don't have it in me. What do you say to them, Kyle?
First, I validate the overwhelm because what these parents often need is to be seen, right? They need to be seen and how hard it is. I get it. It is overwhelming. I'm the therapist. I understand how overwhelming. And I could turn to my wife and go, "Gee, I'm so glad it's 8 p.m. Our kids were a lot today. I love them, but they were so much. And I just was getting to my point where I couldn't. And sometimes during the day, we both tag out, where it's just like, You're taking over. I'm out." Right? Because it gets that overwhelming. And for those parents, it's helping them see, of course, this is. You are working, you're trying to show up for your kids, you're trying to take care and get them food, you're trying to show up for them emotionally, you're trying to also take care of yourself. And I think there's something my wife and I talk about is parents with kids might only get 30 minutes to an hour to themselves a day. And so that's not much time for us to have space for our own self-care. And so it is this situation, especially if you don't have a lot of help, where you're just grinding and yes, trying to show up for your kids. And
Yeah.
it's really overwhelming. So one, helping that parent feel validated and seen and connected, which that empathy that I offer them actually helps them start to tap into the empathy for their kid
Mm. Yeah.
because they're getting a connection from someone else, which then builds the resources internally for them to start to take that empathy to someone else, which is their kid. And then that
Have
creates an
to
opportunity.
self-care.
Hmm.
We have to self-care because I know as a mom myself, I think once I had a child, I have never been to the bathroom by myself anymore. Something is always needed
Hmm.
exactly when I'm taking some time for me, take
Hmm.
a bath, take a shower, go to the bathroom,
Yep.
brush my teeth. It's like that is not the private zone anymore.
Yep.
And so how do parents do it? How do we carve out space when every ounce of our house is like a free-for-all for our kids?
I mean, I think this is where, especially if you're in a two-parent household, is how can one of us step up for a period of time?
Yeah.
How can one of us go for a walk? And, sometimes I'll go into the bathroom and take my phone and go, I'm taking a bathroom break, and I will shut that door, even though my daughter's like, I want to come go potty,
Yeah.
right? But it's like still even that like little bit before that door opens that I get a little bit of that time. But it's really about my spouse and I being able to ask for that and try to support each other and getting that 10 minutes on the couch or 10 minutes in our bedroom or however we want to do that to then the other parent to kind of make space for that.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important too of where are there pockets for things that light you up and bring you joy, right? And how can we carve that in? And how can we have our kids involved in that a little bit, but also have it be something that you get to do? And like that's an ongoing negotiation between my wife and I to prioritize our self-care. But that's also hard. It's just hard of like, how do we fit this in? And if we do fit it in, will we have the energy to actually do the thing that we know would bring us joy.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that also I think is very important is to expand your network.
Yep.
It just can't be you and it just can't be your spouse and
Hmm.
just the two of you. You've got to expand it.
Hmm.
What that might look like, or at least when I was had a little one, now mine's going off to college. You have little ones and mine's launching. Um, but when I was had a little one, I swapped with neighbors because she didn't have family and I didn't have family close by.
Hmm.
So I would take their kid as they took, a date night and I would swap.
Hmm.
And we'd go out and they would have them. We had to get creative
Right.
about we need time.
And when you took that time, how did that impact how you showed up as a parent?
So much better.
Hmm.
So much better. My husband and I felt connected. We were able to laugh. We did not talk about our child when we went away, even though we tried to every once in a while, and we'd have to call each other out on it.
Hmm.
We felt like we had more energy,
Hmm.
and I had more spoons to give our child
Right. And
to be.
I think that's what's so important is a lot of us, we feel like we just got to burn, burn, burn and push, push, push. And that's where we have less tolerance for our child's emotions, less tolerance for their behavior, less capacity to guide them and connect with them. And that's where I see parents and even myself, when I get past that capacity point, that I might want to use that more dominant strategy, or I might just want to shut down. But those are clues to me that, okay, I am past my limit and I got to work with my wife. I got to work with my resources. We got to hire a babysitter for this period of time. And even if it's for 2 hours, just so I can have this break to regain my bandwidth. Because as a parent who's wanting to raise secure kids, you have to be able to have that bandwidth. And it starts by pouring into your cup so then you can pour into your child's cup.
Yeah. You know what I love about this episode?
What?
I don't think we intended it. We came in thinking about how to how to create a secure child.
Hmm.
And one of the ways to create a secure child is to take care of ourselves.
Hmm.
I just love that. Most of the time, we're hearing all these things about all these what to do for the child and how to do this and how to do that and how to, what technique to use and, 5 steps to this. And we're saying, eh, one of the ways you can do that is to take care of yourself because then you have the energy to implement all of those strategies that you've learned.
Yeah.
It begins with us
Hmm.
creating space for us to be rested enough and to be fulfilled enough to allow our children to have their emotions and to work with them as a team.
Yeah. And I think this is another part that's really important is we have to also make space for ourselves and the self-care, but also make space for our young inner child that might show up as we're parenting our kids. Right? I know there's a part where growing up feeling overwhelmed didn't feel really safe. Right? That's where I got more of kind of a dominant strategy. That was kind of, oh, no, you can't be overwhelmed. And so I got the message being overwhelmed is unsafe. It's not okay. There's going to be punishment. And so when I would get overwhelmed, especially when an infant with very little sleep and also trying to deal with a toddler, I noticed when I would get overwhelmed, it didn't feel safe and I'd want to get angry, which isn't safe for an infant, right? And they talk about that. And so I had to learn, I opened up to my wife about, yeah, I noticed that I get overwhelmed and I get super angry really quick. And I've been trying to understand why. Well, that's because that emotion wasn't always connected with as a kid. And so, wife, I'm actually trying to connect with you on this overwhelm now. I'm doing it differently now because I don't want to get angry. I don't want that to be my emotion. I want it to be safe to be overwhelmed. And so that was me noticing my own kind of emotional map that I had, that I got an opportunity to do it differently for myself because of my kids, so that I could do it differently for them. And this goes for all different types of emotions, right? Your kids might be playful and laughing and screaming and getting loud, and that might not feel safe because when you did that, you got yelled to shut up or be quiet or whatever that was. And so, how do you notice these things that come up and might even sometimes come out reactively? Because a lot of us, we might do the reactions that were taught to us, that we experience, because that's what we know. And how can we look at that with that curiosity and compassion that Kim, you talked about in our last episode, in episode 25? How can we look at that so that we can evaluate how we're showing up and what we need so we can be that parent we want to be?
Yeah. What you're talking about is kind of like reparenting ourselves too in the process,
Yeah.
like having space for little Kyle,
Hmm.
right? Um, when you were just a little boy and tending to that
Hmm.
and choosing something different as an adult.
Hmm.
It's really, really powerful work, and it's really changes how we can show up for our own children. And with that said, there might be even some feelings that we have as we start to do things differently than we did for our parents, that we get kind of like jealous is a very strong word, but that kind of feeling of
Yeah.
like, I have to give this, I never got this.
Right.
And that's a really normal feeling.
It is.
When you're doing it so different than how you were raised,
Hmm.
it is normal to look back and go, "Ah, this seems so unfair," right? And so that's the time that we've got to be tending to little Kyle, little Kim.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, you deserved that when you were little that you didn't get.
Hmm.
And now look at you. You're
Right.
doing this for your kiddos, and to take time to celebrate that.
Which is then where you get that safety that, oh, I am on the right path. I can't keep growing. I can't keep doing this. But that's what's so hard about it too, is we might have these younger parts of ourselves was like, well, this is dumb. I didn't get this. Why does my child get this? And that's just our inner child that's kind of throwing a tantrum. And sometimes if our parents didn't have the capacity, they had their own blocks, they had their own stuff that they weren't able to show up for us, we got to show up for ourselves. It's not our fault, but it is our responsibility. And when I'm working individually with clients and sometimes even with my couples, it's the same thing. We're having them have new interactions with their parents as they were a kid, even if it's 30 years later, right? Or they're talking to their younger kid, even though it's 30 years later, and giving that kid a different message. And in that work, you can tell that that human feels so much more safer just because they got a safer message. They got to look at it a little bit differently and they got to get that comfort and validation that their heart needed, which is what emotionally focused individual therapy is really all about.
Yeah. Such good stuff, Kyle. So what I'm hearing is you want a secure kid? Take care of yourself.
Today's episode reminded us that parenting starts with self-care. Validation matters more than perfection. Setting boundaries and empathy go hand in hand, and reparenting ourselves helps us show up for our kids. Follow the roadmap to secure love on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Sign up for the Secure Attachment Path course to learn practical tools for building secure connections. Link in the show notes. Until next time, stay connected and love fully.